Okay, so good morning, everybody. This is Carol Woodbury, and today we're going to talk about practical uses of the authority collection feature. So today I'm going to attempt to do a bit of a live demo for some of this, and so we'll be switching between PowerPoint and Access Client Solutions, where we see the result of the authority collection. So hopefully it won't be too confusing, and hopefully we'll get through this without any hiccups. I don't have somebody monitoring the questions today, so if you have questions, feel free to type them in the question box, but I will be waiting until the end to be able to handle those. Also, no need to request specifically to get the handouts. You'll get a link to the recording and the handouts after this session. So with that, we'll get going. All right, so let me get in presentation mode here. So we're going to talk about what the authority collection actually is, and then we'll talk through some practical examples on starting and ending it, how to access the output, most of all, how to learn to read the output, how to use it in practical ways, like to reduce authority, and then it's also good for debugging authority failures. So we'll go through examples of all of that. Okay, so authority collection is part of the base operating system. So it's provided in V7R3, and it was enhanced in V7R4. So in V7R3, IBM added the functionality to, by user, be able to collect information on what it touches and the authorities that are required to touch each one of the objects. And then in V7R4, they kind of slanted it from a different direction, and you can put the collection on a specific object. So in V7R3, it's by user, and it collects what object it touches. And then in V7R4, again, kind of comes at it from a different direction. You start the collection on a specific object, and it collects which users access that object and the authority required to access that object. So not just who touches the object, or from the user perspective, what it's touching, but the more important part of this information is that it collects what the user's current authority is and where the authority is coming from. So if it's coming from ALLOBJ, or if it's coming from a group, it will tell us which group it is, or if it's a private authority or public authority, and it even tells us adopted authority and what program was in the call stack last. So it gives us a tremendous amount of authority and information, and as we see later, actually kind of gives us too much authority. So I'll show you how to filter that out. Then it will, I think most important, tell us the exact authority that the operating system is requiring for that particular operation. I know it's really hard sometimes to know what authority is required, and there's Appendix D in the Security Reference Manual that tells you the authority to run each command, but sometimes that just is not enough. But this tells us very specifically what is required by the operating system. And then it also tells us whether the authority check is successful or not, and that helps us with that scenario of debugging authority failures. So let's move on to some specifics here. Well, I like to describe how you can use it, and then I'll describe the actual implementation of this. So I've used it to help our clients remove all object from a service account. That's one of the best ways to use authority collection. I've also used, at that same account, we used it to determine what authority is required to access something in the IFS. So a lot of times the IFS is kind of a black hole, and I understand that, but this really takes the guesswork out of knowing what authority is required. Another thing is that a lot of people will often want to lock down one particular file or a set of files, or maybe a set of files in one particular library. But of course, you can't break anything. And so prior to the authority collection in V7R4, you must look at the audit journal entries, the ZR and the ZC audit journal entries, to know whether a user is reading an object or updating an object. But that ZC record is kind of tricky because it may not just be a straight up update. It may be something like add physical file member, which requires more than change. So the nice thing about the authority collection is that it's going to tell us all of that information. We can also determine what authority is required when an authority failure is occurring, and we can determine where authority is coming from. So the scenario of how is this person getting access to this file or data area or program or whatever it is. And again, authority collection spells that out. All right, so this is the command that you use, and it's used in both V7R3 and slightly differently in V7R4. I'll show you that in a minute. This is the start authority collection command. So you name the user profile. So this is the profile on which the collection is to be started. And I can be very specific or very broad in the access that I collect. So I'm going to tell you that from experience, you want to scope this down as much as you can. But again, I also know from experience, when you first try this, you'll probably leave it wide open and collect everything under the sun, because that's what I did just to see how it worked. But you'll quickly learn that that collects a lot of information, and you will want to scope this down as much as possible. So you can scope it down to a library or set of libraries, and you can use multiple lists of libraries. You can then scope it down to a specific object or all objects, and you can scope it down to specific types of objects. So this is when I want to get information on what I'm accessing in a library. Okay, we'll talk about the IFS in just a minute. So the easiest way to get started with this is through, and really the only way to look at the results of this is through Access Client Solutions. I don't want you to be intimidated by this because Access Client Solutions has been updated to have a feature called Insert from Examples. And so anything that you have to use one of those views in QSYS 2.4 has an example in it. And so when you launch Access Client Solutions, you're going to use the Run SQL scripts. When you get into Run SQL scripts, you're going to go to Edit and then Insert from Examples. And in that case, you can insert one of these examples. Now, again, it's been enhanced. You want to get one of the last couple releases of Access Client Solutions to get the most current and most useful, I guess I should say, set of examples. Now, a lot of times, to be honest, I don't think I've ever used one of these examples as is, but I'm not an SQL guru, but I can modify it once I know that I have something that works. So I will insert this and then I will modify it to be, use it the way that I want to. So that's really the way to get started. Okay, so the way that this looks, and again, I'm going to flip between, and hopefully this will work, between reel and slides. All right, so what I just did was run this select statement. And again, the way that you get the information, once you get the authority collection started, it's being gathered by the operating system. Now that it's not in some object, you can't see the authority collection object, it's kept below the MI. So we can't see it or display it. We need to pull it out using one of these views. So the view that you use when you're collecting on a user is called authority underscore collection. All right, so I just did this. So the authorization name is going to be the user profile that you started the collection on. Timestamp, the object name, system object name, object type, and we can keep scrolling to the right here for a very long time. Okay, so there's lots and lots of information here. So we're actually going to need to scope that down a little bit. So let's look at an example. Okay, now before I get started, the authority collection is not a log. Don't think of this as a log. It's actually an index, okay? And so it's indexed by, in this case, it's indexed by the user that you started the collection on, and then by object, alphabetical order by library and object. So once you start this, when you go to look at it, and if you only started on one profile, you may think, well, I'll just go to the bottom of the log, scroll down to the bottom, and I'll see the latest results. Well, that's not the way this works. It stores this information by object name. Okay, the other thing is that, and I'm going to page up a couple. The other thing is that depending on the detail that you specify here, will be how many times that access is logged in this, I use the word log, recorded in this, the authority collection. So if I access an object 500 times, it will only record it once if I need the same authority all 500 times. So it is not a log. Don't think of it as a log, okay? So just think about that. And while it is very complete in telling us what authority is required, the one thing it doesn't do, the one kind of hole in this picture, is that it doesn't tell us what special authority is required. So like when I'm creating a user profile or changing a user profile, it will tell me the authority that I need to run create user profile command, but it will not tell me that I also need secadmin special authority. So again, just be aware of that, understand that there's that one kind of hole in this. The other thing is to note the timestamp. So again, it's a record of past access. If you have changed the access somewhere along the way, that past access it won't be overwritten. So you need to pay attention to the timestamp. If you start modifying some of your authorities, you probably want to clear the collection for that user and start over again so you don't confuse yourself. And why am I saying that? Because I have confused myself. All right, let's go some more. Let's have an example. Let's say I need to update or change a data area. So I have a user profile called CJW test. That's what I'm going to start the collection on. The data area will be in the library QGPL. I want all of the data areas. I'm scoping this down to only data areas, however. So if I run the next, here we go, collection. All right, we can see that we're collecting it for CJW test. You can see that I didn't scope it down. I didn't scope down my SQL statement to just the things in QGPL. I was actually collecting it on other things. And so I've got a lot of information here. All right, so here I can scope it down a little bit more. And so when I just scope it down to the one object that I'm looking for, in this case, you can see it is CJW test as the user, the object is demo, or the object name is demo, the schema is QGPL, data area is a type, and the required authority is change. Okay, so it is very clear what authority is required to update a data area. All right, so going back to this presentation, what I would have done in this case is to start the collection, have CJW test attempt to access the data area. Now, maybe CJW test only had use authority. So I tried to run change data area and I got an authority failure. This is going to tell me exactly that I need change. Okay, so that's how that can work. So this is, when you get the handouts, you'll get the version of the SQL scripts that I'm running. You can see they're in the handouts here. So let's look at how one might debug an authority failure. Okay, so let's say that I had an authority failure when I was running add physical file number. So here's an example of a data area. I've got an AF entry. I'm pulling this out of the audit journal, so I have an AF authority failure. and it's on the all users file in the CJW library. Okay, so how do I deal with that? Okay, what I would do is start this authority collection again, in this case CJW test 2. I am going to start it on the library called ProdLib, because is that where it is? Nope. Well, that we're going to start on ProdLib, okay, and it's a file. So when I go and run that SQL, it's going to show me that I have an unsuccessful authority check. And you can see, again, here's all this information. Here's the detailed required authority. My current authority is change. Well, that is why I'm getting the authority failure, because the current authority is change and the required authority is object management and object alter, which does not equal change. Okay, the current authority source is public authority. So that's why I'm getting an authority failure. Okay, next scenario. Let's try to use this to determine where authority is coming from. So first of all, let's just review the authority search order really quick. So I'm going to go into presentation mode so you can see this stepwise. So in the authority search order, the first thing that is checked is the user. So if the user has some authority, the check will not go on. All right, so the first thing that is checked at the user level is all object special authority. If the user does not have all object, then it goes on to check to see if the user has a private authority. If the user has all object, they get in and they do whatever they need to do. If they don't have all object, it looks for private authority. So let's say I am updating that data area again. So I need change to the data area to do that. If I have a private authority of use, I will get that not authorized message and an AF entry in the audit journal. So if I don't have all object and I don't have a private authority that gets me access, or any private authority I should say, then it goes on to see if the object is secured with an authorization list. If it's secured with an authorization list, again, if the authority is sufficient, if the user has change authority to the authorization list, then they can do the change data area. But if they only have views, they're going to get the not authorized message. So the thing to remind you of in the authority search order is that the authority search order stops if any authority is found at the user level. All right. Next up are it looks for the groups. So again, if no authority was found at the user level, then it will proceed on to the group. Now, it's kind of weird. If you have multiple groups, it's actually going to search through all the groups to try to find sufficient authority. So again, it will check the group in the order that they were defined in the user profile. That first group profile is checked first. But say that first group doesn't have any authority. It will then proceed on to the second group. What if the first group has a private authority of exclude? Well, it still will proceed on to the second and the third and the fourth group until it tries to find enough authority or you run out of groups. So if the second group has exclude authority and you have no more groups, you're just excluded. Okay, so groups are a little bit different than the user section. But if you have nothing at the user and nothing at the group, then it will proceed on to the public authority. And for public authority, it can come from either the object itself, or if it is secured by an authorization list, it can come from the authorization list if you have pointed public to the authorization list. You must say public auth list, have it come from the authorization list. And then if all else fails, if you don't get authority from any other place, and even if you're excluded from an object, say I have a private authority of exclude at the user level, if there is adopted authority in the call stack, the system is going to check the program owner's authority at the user level to see if that user has sufficient authority to let the process go on. And if it has sufficient authority, it will go on. So that's how adopted authority works. Okay, so let's look at this a little bit. So I've done a display object authority of the sales file. And from all appearances, if I was trying to access this file, I would get a not authorized message, assuming I don't have all object. So at first glance, anybody accessing this file should get a not authorized. I think we can all agree with that because it's public authority of exclude, no authorization list. Okay, so let's look at this. So somehow, however, Fred is able to access this file. So let's see what that might be looking like. Okay, here's Fred. Fred is accessing the sales. There's in the prod lib. Okay, so we have the right one. Detailed authority required. Looks like they need use authority. Oh, but the current authority is all. How is that happening? Let's see. Authority source, belongs to a group that has all object. Well, that's how he's getting access. Now you could just go and look in Fred's, you could do a display user profile and display Fred's authorities and his groups and figure out which one it is, but you can also find that out from this collection. You just need to include another field here, and where it says authority source, just include the group name. Boom, you've got the group that is giving Fred too much authority. Well, authority to access the file. Okay, so that's example one. Example two. Let's see. Okay, so example two, we have another example of a file where Fred is getting access. So again, let's start the collection. Okay. Oh, this is just the screens of what I've just showed you. Okay, here's another one. So in this case, Fred is able to access the pricing file. And again, I think we can agree that public is exclude. So unless Fred had all object, and Fred has now been removed from the power group. So Fred is no longer going to get access from the power group. So how is he going to get access this time? All right, let's see what the authority collection can say for us. So we started the authority collection again on Fred. And this time it comes up with, okay, now we've got the pricing file. Again, trying to read the file. Current authority is exclude and public authority is, and the authority source is public. Well, now, okay, this doesn't make sense. I mean, it does make sense because as we saw back here, public is exclude, but yet we know that Fred is able to see this file. We've seen it happen. So how is this happening? Okay, so when you see something like this and like this is not making sense to you, so the key with the authority collection is if you see something and it's not making sense, you either have too much authority or not enough. So in this case, it's not enough authority. So we're going to include some more fields. And in this case, we're going to include the fields that give us an insight as to whether adopted authority was in use. So we're going to keep going to the right here, and adopted authority is used. There we go. That's what the problem is. Okay, so, well, let's keep on going, and let's see where we can find the rest of this information. So basically, I'm just going to give us all of the information in the collection for these records. So let's scroll to the right here. Okay, the authority check was successful. We knew that, right? And we knew that the detailed required authority was used and the current authority is exclude and it's coming from public. Well, let's keep scrolling to the right. Adopted authority is used. Oh, and here's the adopting program name, menu option 1. Here's the library it resides in, and it should tell us who owns it. Yep, adopting program owner. So again, you can use this to very clearly show us where that authority is coming from. So really helpful information, again, in debugging either authority failures or how somebody's getting access or not getting access. Okay. Now, when you start that collection, one of the things I haven't really described is when you start that collection, if you have already started it for one set of information and you need to look at a different set of information, you're going to have to start and stop the collection and rescope it, okay? So just know that. Also, when you start the collection on a user profile, you do not have to have them sign off and sign back on. It just starts immediately. So that's really handy to know that. Same thing with the starting the collection on an object. It just starts immediately. Nothing to do there. Just starts. Okay, so there we go. So now let's look at changing the authorities on a directory. Like I said, I know that looking at the IFS is kind of a black hole to people. So let's show you how the authority collection can help in that case. So I have a scenario where I want to secure the payroll file. So right now it's public authority, the equivalent of all. It's data authority of RWX, object authority of all, okay? So what I need to do though is figure out, there's a service account that runs a nightly job. It writes to the payroll directory and then it FTPs something up. So how do I figure that out? Okay, so in this case, I'm going to start the collection, in this case for service one, that's my service account. Now, in this case, I'm going to have to say that I want to not collect anything on any libraries. When I go for the directories, it assumes that you're going to specify something for libraries. So if you're really only interested in directories, I mean, you can collect both at the same time, but if you're really targeting directories for a particular user profile, you'll want to say that you want to specify nothing at the library level, and then you come down here and it says include file system objects. Now, the only thing you have the option to do in this case, it's much more granular in V7R4, but in V7R3, the only thing you can do is collect it by object type. So I'm going to collect access for service one for all of the directories and all of the stream files. Okay, so any directory or stream file that service one is going to be touching, I'm going to collect information for. So I'll start that collection, and then the result that I'm going to get will look like this. Okay, now remember I had to start it for all of the directory objects and all of the stream files. So anything that service one did is going to be logged. But what I'm really interested in is payroll. So now I'm going to have to be able to go through root, which if you set it to the access we recommend, that's fine. Object operand execute. So RX, that's good there. But here's the payroll directory. So RX, but I'm writing into the service one account is writing into it. So the service account needs RWX into that payroll directory, and then here's the authority to the stream file. Well, it's owning it because it's creating it. Okay, so again, very clear. I just look and see what access I need. I needed to read it, but I need an overriding one because I need to write it. So I just need to give it RWX and I'm good. All right, so I can now safely set this directory to public exclude, and I can give service RWX because that's all it needs. Or if I wanted to, I could make service the owner if that's the way that you want to do it. So again, it spells it out. No guess, or the guesswork is gone. So it just makes this so much easier than it used to be. Okay, so how would I use this to remove all objects? Again, here I have my service account. I want to look at prod lib. So I can go and look at that. So this would be collecting all of the objects the service all object is touching in the prod lib library. All right, so I can see what I need here. So here's pricing, here's inventory, sales, and it gives me exactly what I need here. Detailed required authority. So interestingly enough, there's a couple places here where it says that I need all authority. Now, I know for a fact that the service all object account isn't deleting anything. So why is it telling me I need all authority? Well, the strange thing, and remember I said if things aren't making sense, it's either that I have too much authority or too much information on this screen, or I don't have enough. And this is a case where I don't have enough. Or actually, this is a case where I have too much authority. IBM has made this incredibly granular, and they have given us so much authority for every access to this file. What has actually happened in this case is that it has also registered the actions and access by operating system programs. To me, that's not helpful. So if you see and you scroll right, so this is a case again where it's saying that the required authority is all, and I know for a fact there's no reason that I should have to have all. So again, I'm going to expand the information that it's been given to me, and it shows that it's adopting authority is in effect, and the adopting program is one of these operating system programs. It's like, I don't care about that. So one way to get rid of it is to say where the the authorization name is the account that you're looking at, and adopting program owner is null. And that will get rid of those entries where the adoption comes from the operating system. I don't care that under the covers, the operating system has adopted QSIS. All I care about is what my service account needs. So this will get rid of that extraneous information. I really wish that IBM hadn't logged this information to the authority collection when it's coming from the operating system, but they did. So sometimes you need to omit it, and this is the way to omit it. Okay, so how do I know if a profile collection has been started? If you do a display user profile and scroll all the way to the end, it will tell us that the values have started, or whether or not it has been started for that particular user profile and on what it has been started. That, or you can run this select on the repository, and you can say repository exists, yes, and it will list out. So it will list out whether the authority collection is active and whether or not the repository exists. Okay, because you can turn off the collection, but just turning off the collection does not delete the repository. So this information will stay around, and you can query it unless you delete it or it is damaged in some way and goes away. Okay, so V7R4. V7R4 introduced a new command, and so this is a two-step process to get the collection turned on when you're talking about it from an object perspective. So again, remember V7R4 allows us to turn the collection on a particular object, and it will start to register every user that touches that object and what authority is required and where that authority is currently coming from. All right. So this command, the way that you configure it, and again, it's kind of a two-step thing. You have to configure which objects are going to have the collection started, and then you have to actually start the collection. It's kind of like the system values for auditing. So, if you're going to audit actions, you specify those in the Q odd level system value, and that's what actions are going to be audited. But you can fill that system value up But if you don't have odd levels specified in Q odd control, none of those actions are audited. So this is kind of the same thing. You can configure the authority collection on objects, but it doesn't actually start the collection until you start the next command that I'll show you. So you can configure it using change authority collection. Now, they didn't give us two commands, one for IFS objects and one for library objects, so you have to know how to specify your library objects using a path name. It's not a big deal. For library objects, you just specify qsys.lib first. That's the file system, qsys.lib. And then you specify the library name. So I specified in this case, skyview.lib. All right. And just like all of the other commands where it takes a path name, it's going to have this value called parameter called directory subtree. And if you say all, then it applies to everything in that subtree, or in this case, it's everything in that library. Okay, so it's not a difficult thing to specify this, just have to get the hang of it. Okay, so in this case, I am starting a collection on all of the objects in the SkyView library. So remember, that's the configuration, right? And now I need to turn it on. I need to actually activate that collection. And you do that using the command that was introduced in V7R3, start authority collection. And they've added a new parameter to it. And the new parameter is type of authority collection. So it defaults to user profile. So in this case, we would change it to be object authority collection. And this one is delete the existing collection. So typically you would say no. Okay. All right. So once you start the collection on the objects, you're going to get the information on the collection same way. You're going to use run SQL scripts. Only in this case, they have provided different views for us to use. In fact, they've provided 4, and it depends on the type of information. So DLOs, I know unfortunately there's still some people using DLOs, so there's one view for that. Then there's a view for the IFS objects, and then the first 2 that I've listed here will produce the same information regardless of which one you use. It's just that one performs better than the other, okay? So you just have to kind of play around with it and know that there's 2 of them and know that one will perform better in certain situations than others. So you want to read up on that before you start using these. So in this case, what I've done is to look at which profile is using the check command. So the check command is in the SkyView PMP library. Remember, I turned on the collection for every object in that library. So I'm using the authority collection libraries view in this case. And I said, where system name is check. So now I have a listing of all of the profiles that are using that check command. It happens to only be one, whoops, go back. Happens to only be one user profile that has used it, but if there were multiples, then they would be listed here too. And again, it's going to give us the same information, what authority is required and so forth. Now, one of the things I didn't show when I was showing the collection by user, that if you go all the way to the right hand of the information that is provided, you'll get the user, the job information. So the job name, job user, job number. So again, that comes in handy again from probably a debug perspective, or in this case, you know, sometimes you see an object and the last use date is current, maybe it's today, but maybe you have no idea who's using it. So this would be a way to find out who's using that command. So you turn the collection on for that particular object, and there you go. Now you know where it's being used. So another thing is that a lot of times people are going to use the object authority collection to secure an application, or maybe just one library in an application. In this case, perhaps it's that you want to look at just securing the files. So again, I've turned the collection on for a particular library, and this time I want to just see what it looks like for those files. And again, you can find out who all is accessing it, and it will list out the authority that is being required. And again, here's a way to look at the authority collection for IFS objects. So I showed you an IFS example before, but that was when I knew a specific profile was accessing a directory. So I knew the profile I wanted to target. But what if you have a directory and you don't know who's accessing it? And that is often the case. That's what we find anyway. We don't know who's accessing that directory. So again, you would start the authority collection on that particular directory. And in that case, it's going to be easy to start the collection, because remember, one is by object, it's asking for a path name. So I would just be looking for, I would turn the collection on, in this case, everything in the SkyView directory. So now when a profile accesses the SkyView directory, we've got it logged. So in this case, it was CJW, and in some cases it was QSIC offer, and again, CJW. So now I know exactly who is accessing that directory. Again, takes the guesswork out of it. There's really no excuse for not setting authority on directories when you can have it spelled out like this. Okay, so how do you know when an authority collection is started on an object versus a user? Remember, we did a display user profile when it was turned on for the user. So similarly, if we do display object description for an object, it will tell us when the authority collection has been started for that. And again, there's a couple ways to find it. If you're using Navigator for I, you would go to the object, come under Actions, and they've now listed authority collection. And you can change it. You can change the attributes, actually configure it there, display it, delete the collection for that object, and so forth. Okay, so you can find that there. The other thing that I like to use, and this is a good example of a view that IBM has provided for us that is incredibly useful, and that's the object statistics view. Okay, one of the object statistics that is listed is the authority collection value. And again, object statistics is really just an SQL view into display object description. It basically gives us the same information. It's just that we can access it via SQL. And so display object description shows one object at a time, but here I can actually look at all of the objects and pull it back for the entire system if I want to. All right, so I've given you the exact SQL statement that you would need to do for a directory. All right. Okay, so for some additional information, the commands, again, to end the collection, you would use end authority collection or delete authority collection. Just ending it does not delete it, so understand that. You can't delete it while it's active, so that's good. All of the authority collection commands ship as public exclude, so not just anybody can turn those on or configure it. And you must have either all object or be in the application administration or function usage. You have to have either all object or be the database security administrator to enable this function. The collections, be aware that when you're saving an object or saving a user profile, the corresponding authority collection information is not saved with those objects. So if you're doing a save sec data to save all of your user profiles, the authority collection is not being saved at the same time. It will save the fact that the collection has been turned on for that profile or turned on for that object, but it is not saving the corresponding information. So if you need to keep that information, you'll need to pull that information out of the appropriate authority collection view, and create a table, create a separate file with that information, and save that off separately. This is a good thing to do anyway. I have found out the hard way that if you have an abnormal IPL, often this table that is containing the authority collection information can get damaged, and when it gets damaged, then the information goes away. So we lost, at one client, we lost about 2 weeks of information that we had been collecting along the way. So made it a habit of just doing a nightly save of that information so that we wouldn't lose it. So just be aware of that. All right. Also, there's Chapter 10 in the Security Reference Manual. That was added in V7R3 to discuss authority collection. So it was added in V7R3. It was enhanced in V7R4 to add that more information. And a description of each one of the fields is listed here, although that's the developer work. So it's going to redirect you to the support page where the authority collection or where all these views are now described. All right. Okay, so the other thing is that once you get this going, one of the things you want to do is save your SQL. And I don't know if you realize that you can do that, but when you're in run SQL scripts, if you've gotten the SQL the way that you want it and you have a set of SQL statements you want to save, you can do a save as. So I have a save as, and I have a authority collection view that whenever I want to do authority collection, I just open it and I have all my statements there. I don't need to recreate it every time. And with that, I think I will go and look for questions. Of course, we have professional security services that we can help you with a variety of different services. Help Systems also has a variety of different products that we can help you with to implement multiple layers of defense. All right, so let me see if there's some questions that need to be answered here. Okay, let's see. Start the collection from multiple users. You cannot start the collection from multiple users. You have to start the okay, the question was, in V7R3, can you start the collection from multiple users? No, you cannot. You have to start that collection, and it is one at a time. Okay, so that's what that looks like. Other questions that anybody might have, I can, if you'll just type them in the Q&A box, then I can attempt to answer them. All right, any more questions coming in? Okay, so again, you will get these handouts. I have tried to provide the SQL that I was using in these handouts so that you don't, again, have to recreate these queries. But again, if the information that you're seeing is not making sense, you either are looking at too much information and you need to pull out like the adopted authority from the operating system, or you're not looking at enough. So that's, once you start to use that, that statement will make a lot more sense. Okay, I don't think that anybody else has any other questions. So with that, I will end. Oops, here we go. So I can start the collection on individual users, but use the SQL to look at multiples. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's collected. You have to enable it one by one, but you can look at it any which way you want to through the SQL. Yep, absolutely. And don't try to use Start SQL to see this information because not all of the fields will resolve correctly. You really need to use Start SQL, Run SQL scripts through ACS. All right. Well, with that, I will close out. Thank you so much for joining me today, and thank you for your patience as I flip between that live demo and the handouts. Hope you have a good rest of your day, and stay safe, everyone. Bye-bye.